you're like most people, you're probably looking for a life that has meaning and connection and stability and purpose. And the question quickly becomes, how do we do it? How do we live that kind of life? What does it take for this to become a reality? And so we work hard and we get degrees and we try to find the right person and we have kids and we hope that eventually, somehow, everything is just going to fall into place. And sometimes we discover that that's not at all what we should have been doing. In fact, Jesus teaches a lesson about what it looks like to have that kind of life. It's the life that we call the good life. He shares all about this good life in the introduction to a sermon that he preaches. See, his introduction to a sermon is so good that we can do a series of sermons on his introduction. This is the greatest sermon ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount. It's found in Matthew chapter 5. If you have your Bible, you're going to want to open it up there. You may want to Google that. You can scan the QR code on the chair in front of you. We're going to be there in just a few minutes. But there we will find the introduction to the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is teaching and preaching the message that he kept in his back pocket. It was the message that everywhere he went, every chance he had, he preached this message. He shared this idea. He was communicating to people that to follow him, to chase after him, to have a life oriented toward him, to pledge allegiance to him, was to have a life that was different than the lives of the people around them. And he says, when you do that, here's what you can expect. And he gave us a list of blessings. A list of blessings that were not a to-do list, but they were things that will sprout up in the lives of people who give their heart and their mind to him. And so today we're going to continue that series. We're in part 7 of that series. If you missed the first 6, no worries. Today will make perfectly good sense on its own. But if you'd like to catch up, you can always do so on YouTube. Let me explain to you the way the Beatitudes work like this. I recently went fishing with my wife, Rebecca, and my oldest son, Jackson. And we took our little fishing boat out, and we found this little cove, and it was a great spot to fish. You know, sometimes you fish, and you find this place, and you're like, if I just cast it right there, like I'm going to catch the biggest fish I've ever caught, right? And so we were in one of those kinds of places, where it looked like if you could just cast it right there, that you would catch a fish. And so we did, time and time again. We were casting and reeling, and something amazing was happening. My wife was standing 6 feet away from me. We were using the same lure. We were using the same line. We were casting into the same spot. We were reeling at the same speed. And every time she cast, she caught a fish. 9 times she caught a fish. And at the end of the day, we went in with her 9 and my grand total of 0. 0 fish caught. And it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense because I was watching what she was doing. I would watch her throw the lure into the water. Have you seen those videos online where wives try to mimic the speed that their husband eats? Like they can't keep up with them because they're like devouring their food. Like I reel too fast also. And it's like I'm watching Rebecca reel and I'm like, that's way too slow. You're not going to catch a fish. And bam, she catches a fish. And me, nothing. And it makes no sense because we got the same reel and we got the same lure and we got the same line and we're at the same place. And somehow the calculus doesn't add up. And the Beatitudes are actually just a little bit like that. You see something from a distance and you assume that you know the outcome. You assume that you know that it's going to work out in a certain way. And instead, Jesus tells us that when we live our lives pointed towards him, that our lives are going to be different than anything that we ever could have expected. In fact, what Jesus says is that there are 2 ways of living in the world. There's the way of the world, and there's the way of Jesus. And these 2 ways of doing things, these 2 experiences that you have in life are diametrically opposed. To follow Jesus is to do a life that is completely different than the world around you. And how do we know that? We know that specifically today because the way of the world is division. And the way of Jesus is reconciliation. The way of the world is division because division is profitable. Division is profitable because it guarantees you votes and it guarantees you views. If you can keep people divided, seeking out their own side, their own way of thinking, their own way of doing, you're guaranteed a captive audience. And along the way, you will discover that you can divide people much more easily than you can bring them together. But the way of Jesus is the way of reconciliation. It's to acknowledge that people are better together. And that when we bind ourselves together, when we commit ourselves to Him, that we will find ourselves living lives of peace. And the payoff is going to be worth it. Here's what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. There's a whole list of these blessings, but this is the one we have today. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be children of God. See, when we read this, we're reminded that if we're going to be a person who follows Jesus, that peace should follow us. That when we look back, the wake of our lives should be people who are reconciled, who are made whole, whose lives are better, and not a pathway of destruction. But what Jesus isn't saying is that we're to be people who are doormats, or that we're Switzerland, or that we don't have an opinion or an idea. Jesus is teaching something far deeper than that kind of peace. He's teaching us to be people who bring peace, and it's a kind of peace that we wouldn't ordinarily even expect to be able to achieve. So let's walk through this verse and let's see exactly what it is that Jesus is saying. He begins with this word, blessed. This is the beginning phrase that we've used for the last 7 weeks, the word blessed. And it's important to pause here long enough to at least acknowledge that this word blessed is different than the way that we typically use it. I mean, you can do a lot of things in this world and you can be hashtag blessed, right? Like your luggage came out first at the airport, or you went through the line quickly at the coffee shop, or they gave you a little extra meat at Chipotle, right? Like there are all these ways that we can be hashtag blessed, but we use it so often and in so many ways that the word blessed is actually stripped of its actual meaning. The word blessed is translated from the Greek as the New Testament was written in the Greek language. The Greek word that was originally used has a depth of meaning that we miss so often. The Greek word is makarios, and the definition is a deep fulfillment. And this deep fulfillment that Jesus is talking about speaks to inner wholeness and satisfaction that goes beyond anything that the world can provide. It transcends the circumstances of life. So we can be blessed even when nothing is going right. We can be blessed even when everything is falling apart. We can be blessed when nothing is as we wish that it would be, because being blessed is having a wholeness that transcends the circumstances that I'm currently in. So Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. Now, this is where it gets really interesting to me, because this is not translated as blessed are the peaceful or blessed are the pacifist. It's very intentional that it is telling us to do something. Blessed are the peacemakers. And I think it's translated that way because it's not natural. Being a pacifist or sitting by and letting life happen to you is actually not that hard to do. Being a peacemaker means we enter into moments where we can bring peace. And to understand this fully, I think we need to go back to the first century culture that Jesus is speaking to. Jesus is standing on a hillside in this moment in Matthew chapter 5, and he's sharing with these people this message that he often teaches. And the message that he teaches, he says, we need to be people of peace. Now, the word peace in the first century would strike them differently than it strikes me and you. Because in the first century, the word peace was very common. It was ubiquitous. Everyone knew what it meant. The word peace was something that they would say when people arrived, when they greeted them, and they would say it when they sent them away, when they were walking away. See, we think about peace. We think about the 60s and 70s version that was given to us, right? It's peace signs and tie-dye. This might be one of you. I don't know. But this is kind of what we think about when we think of peace. We think about being nice and saying no to war. That this is the idea that we have when we think about living a life of peace. And that's fine, but that's not the entire picture. See, the no wars and be nice kind of peace is not what Jesus is advocating for. He's advocating for something that is far more difficult to actually achieve. He's advocating for something that changes the way we interact with everyone that we see. Theologian Roger Hahn describes peace like this. He says, peace is total well-being rather than the absence of conflict. See, peace is not just everything is copacetic or I can make it work or we can pretend that it's okay. Peace is actually making sure that everyone around you is made whole, that everything is coming together, that you're a person who is bringing the very best to and out of the people around you. The word that they used for peace in the first century is the word shalom. And it literally means peace, but this kind of peace is a peace that brings wholeness and fulfillment to the people around you. And so Jewish people would say to someone when they approached, shalom, and when they left, they would say shalom. The same blessing of peace is wishing God's wholeness and fullness on people, no matter where they happen to be in their lives. This is a different way of thinking. Jesus is not blessing people who avoid arguments. He's blessing people who restore wholeness in the world around them. You know, each of the Beatitudes that we've looked at over the past several weeks actually come from a teaching in the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. And so these words are probably not new. Like the idea of being a peaceful person is not something that's brand new to these people who know the Jewish Scriptures, but they may not be doing it yet. And so Jesus attaches a blessing to it to maybe make it more powerful or palatable. And he gives an outcome that makes it more likely that we would embrace this kind of living. Here's where this comes from. It comes from Isaiah chapter 52. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who bring good news, the good news of peace and salvation, the news that the God of Israel reigns. So if you want to be a person of peace, you need to be a bringer of the good news that God is for the people around you. To bring the gospel is to be a bringer or a maker of peace. When our kids were little, we used to let them watch cartoons on TV. My favorite when Jackson was little was this thing on PBS called Rags. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's actually scary. Like it's like people in bad costumes and their dogs and like I would let Jackson watch Rags when I was home with him on Fridays, and then I would put him down for a nap, which was the best time of the day when he and I were home alone. And Rags was something that we loved, but every parent, I think, has TV shows that their kids kind of gravitate toward. My kids are a little too old for this one, but I'm familiar with it. I know the plot line. I know what's going on here. Have you ever seen this show? This is Bluey. Anybody seen this? Yes, everyone's seen this, right? Like Bluey's everywhere. My favorite thing about Bluey, I'm going to tell you a spiritual thing in a second, but my favorite thing about Bluey is the fact that this is the colors that dogs can see best, right? And so I try to get my dogs to watch Bluey on TV. They don't really care, but anyway, I think that's a cool idea. But see, this is Bluey and Bluey's family, and Bluey, every Bluey episode goes the same. Okay? Like Rebecca and I watch TV shows, they're all the same. Like someone's missing or killed, someone finds the person who did the thing, and then everyone's happy at the end. Like every show we watch is the same plot line. Every episode of Bluey is also the same. It's Bluey does something to kind of get in a pickle. Bluey is rescued from being in a pickle. Everyone's happy at the end of the episode. Like that's just the way it goes. And Bluey, when Bluey gets in trouble, is almost always rescued by the same person. If you've watched Bluey, you know who this is. Bluey is almost rescued by her dad, and his name is Bandit. Bandit is the one who comes to the rescue, and Bandit all the time is bailing Bluey out. And here's what I love about that. Whether it's the main character of the TV show you watch or whether it's Bandit in Bluey, the person who bails someone out is a tension reliever and a peace restorer. And this is be the kind of people we're supposed to be. We should be living lives that we can be the hero in a story like Bluey. When we look back at our lives, like, are we the people who someone's coming to help bail us out? Or are we the ones who are constantly in a state that we're needing help? The answer to that question can tell us a little bit about where we land in the story that Jesus is telling. And like the other blessings of these Beatitudes, Jesus has a message for us. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And he goes on to say this, "For they will be called children of God." The way this would hit the ears of someone in the first century is just a tiny bit different than us. I mean, you know people who have kids that look like them, right? It's like, oh yeah, mom and baby, like, oh yeah, spitting image, or dad and son, okay. But to hear this in the first century, that someone is a child of someone else, is to say that they've adopted their character. It's more than looking the same. It's being the same. It's knowing that they've picked up the habits and the characteristics that we wanted them to achieve somewhere along the way. In the words of pastor and theologian J.A. Broadus, there's no more godlike work to be done in this world than peacekeeping. If we want to reflect who we are as God's children, if we want to be able to say we're children of God, that we get his character, where we begin is to be people who are making peace. And this is what Jesus did when he came to the earth. He came to make peace between God and humanity. And that means that peacemaking is not just something that God does, it's who God is. Paul makes that clear as he writes to the Colossians in Colossians 1. He says, for God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. He's talking about Jesus here, okay? All of God's fullness dwells in Jesus, verse 20. And through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. The peace that we can experience is peace that comes directly out of the work that Jesus did. And as much as any of the others, this one would have been hard to stomach by first century hearers. The people listening as Jesus spoke this were living in a time of social and political unrest. They were mistrustful of the people around them. They were one cross word or one misstep from being arrested, thrown into jail, potential wars breaking out. It was not a great time to be alive. There are certainly parallels between first century Israel and 21st century America. And the words that Jesus speaks highlight a tension that I think that we sometimes have to hold. I mean, we've been talking about it for 7 weeks, right? Like, the life of a Jesus follower is different from the life of someone else. The life of a Jesus follower cannot reflect the values and way of being that the same way that someone who doesn't follow Jesus does. So the question that we have to ask is, how do I do these things Jesus says while also acknowledging the world that we live in? And this is where it gets hard for me. Because when I think about being a peacemaker in particular, my role is to be a maker of peace, because Jesus tells me to when I pledge my allegiance to him, when I put my faith in him. He says to do that is to experience a life, the blessing of being someone who brings peace. Now the issue is, when it comes to peace, that the world is not a peaceful place, and the role of the government is not the same as my role. My role is to be a follower of Jesus. The role of the government is to protect and defend the interests of the people, which puts me in a weird spot. Like, so if my role is to be a peacemaker and my government's role is to look out for the interests of all the people, what if those things are in conflict? And sometimes I think that happens. When my government attacks another country, how should I respond? What should I do? See, the good news is we're not the first people to wrestle with this. It's happened for generations, for ages. And there's a framework for us to think about this. In fact, it's called just war theory. And the question that just war theory is trying to answer is this one. When, if ever, is war morally justified? That's a legitimate question that I think, as a faithful follower of Jesus, is worth wrestling through. Like, when is that okay? When does it make sense? When is it acceptable for war to be the answer? And the reality is, I'm not going to give you an answer to that question today because I don't have it. Theologians have wrestled with this question for generations. St. Augustine of Hippo and Thomas Aquinas both struggled with this, and I think they gave us a framework to help us think about this in a way that's actually really helpful. That they say this question is really hard to answer for 2 reasons. Number one, because human life has dignity and peace should be pursued. Every human being has value, eternal value in the eyes of God. So, number 2, evil sometimes must be restrained to protect people. You see the tension, don't you? Sometimes evil must be restrained to protect people, but the problem is human life has dignity and peace should be pursued. Somehow those two things need to live in tension so that we can come to grips with the question is war ever morally justified? And this is the balance that our government has to strike. I had a fascinating conversation between services with a young man who served in the United States Army. It's like this is a pain point. This is a tension that he begins to wrestle with. See, Republican, Democrat, otherwise, our government is given a difficult responsibility to hold together this nation. And that's not my responsibility, and that's not your responsibility, but that's their responsibility. So the question is, what do I do when I'm not sure that the right decisions are being made? Remember what Romans 13:4 says. The authorities are God's servants sent for your good. But if you're doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. Now, I know that all of that has generated some emails, okay? Like you're getting ready to hit send, and I'm okay with you hitting send, because here's the thing. Working through these questions and figuring out the answers to these questions is part of being a faithful follower of Jesus. And the beauty is we don't all have to agree on exactly where we land. But when we faithfully wrestle with questions like these, it helps us better understand how we can live a life of peace in the world around us. There's a pastor on the East Coast who I love and appreciate and respect and disagree with most of the time. But he said something about peace that I think just really resonates and helps me understand the way that we live this out. His name is Shane Claiborne. He says, peace doesn't mean passivity. It is the act of interrupting injustice without mirroring injustice. You know what that says? Two wrongs don't make a right. When it comes to being a person of justice, we've got to make sure that we don't meet injustice with injustice. That somewhere along the way, we have to find a place that we can enter into the conversation and keep it above board and keep it centered on the one thing that truly matters. And that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. So when this tension is hard to manage, it begs the question, what do we do? And I want to give you three things that I think are helpful as we think about how we can be people who are makers of peace. The first one is to find peace with God. And this is where it all starts. And really, we need to acknowledge the story of humanity is that humanity stumbled and created a chasm. And God created a way back. If we want to be people who bring peace, we must first receive and experience peace. In Romans 5:1, Paul writes this. He says, therefore, since we've been made right in God's sight by faith, we have peace with God because of what Jesus Christ our Lord has done for us. Before we can become peacemakers, we must be peace receivers. We must acknowledge what God has done for us and receive the gift of peace that he offers to each one of us. And then number two, we can do this. We can live at peace with others. Now, this one is hard. This one is hard because people are difficult. This one is hard because people don't always do what you expect them to do. They don't always follow through in the way that you think they would. Living at peace does not mean you have to agree with everyone. It does not mean that everyone agrees with you. It does not mean you approve of everyone's actions, and it does not mean that every relationship gets restored. Because sometimes people misunderstand you, they will criticize you, and this is a news flash for some of you, but there are people in this world who do not like you. That's true. Now, I also know that's true because there are people in this world who don't like me, which is even more surprising, isn't it? Because I'm a likable guy. But sometimes I cross paths with people who make it abundantly clear that they are not a fan and they do not want to have a conversation. And I can live with that. Why? Because I have lived out what Romans 12:18 says. Paul gives us instruction. He says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. What's the key? The key to being a peacemaker is to, as much as it is possible for me, to be sure that I'm living at peace with other people. And so if there's someone who just decides they don't like me, That's okay. If there's someone who just decides they don't like you, what are you going to do? Because it doesn't matter how much you bend over backwards. It doesn't matter how many deposits you make. There are times, no doubt, that you will never be able to do enough. So as far as it depends on you, be a maker of peace. And the third thing, and this is so important, and this is where being a peacemaker really comes alive, is to help others find peace with God. When you have received peace with God, your responsibility is to then help others experience peace with God. Paul writes about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. He says, so we are Christ's ambassadors. When you say yes to Jesus, you become one of these. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ and we plead, come back to God. You know what ambassadors do? Ambassadors live in one place while representing someone else. That they live somewhere and then they represent someone else. And when you say yes to Jesus, you are living here and representing him. And your goal, my goal then, is to be a bringer of peace, a reconciler of people, which means that you're not just raising kids. It means you're not just going to the office. It means you're not just engaging in that social event. It means that when you're doing so, you're taking the gospel of Jesus with you. You're teaching your kids to grow up and know the name of the Lord and to follow after him. You're representing Jesus to your coworkers, and when they act ungodly, you choose to do something different because the way of Jesus is different than the way of the world. It means that when you interact with someone in a social setting who may not even like you, that insofar as it is possible for you, you do what you can to bring reconciliation and peace, knowing that on the other side, there's someone who has the opportunity to know and experience the power of the gospel in their own lives. See, the world doesn't simply need more Christians who are saying yes to Jesus and ignoring that other people need him. The world is desperate for people to say yes to Jesus and to live lives that reflect him to everyone around them. And it matters because there's someone around you who is dealing with such incredibly deep anxiety, and yet they pretend that they're fine. There's someone near you that is struggling with grief that has got such a deep hold that they're just hanging on by a thread. There is someone around you who is exhausted, angry, lonely, addicted, skeptical, and what they need is a word from someone like you, offering a word of peace to extend to them that same peace that Jesus has given you. See, peace is messy because people are messy. And sometimes it might be easier just to turn the other way, but that's not what Jesus did to us. He saw us in our mess, and he came toward us anyway. And he made a way for us to experience peace and life through him. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we say thank you for reminding us through your teaching today of our role in bringing peace to the people around us. And God, we know our goal, our role isn't to solve every conflict, but to be peacemakers, peace bringers, wherever it is that we go. Help us to show people what it means to live and to love like you. And help us to bring reconciliation and restoration everywhere that we go. We pray all this in Jesus' name.